danger of ultra-processed food. Our food is killing us because it isn't real. If you went to a grocery store in the 1920s, you'd probably be a little bit confused because you'd have a hard time finding your favorite ingredients and snacks. But if a person from the 1920s came to a grocery store in 2026, they would be dumbfounded. They probably would be confused if they were even actually in a grocery store because it looks like a different dimension. Just bright colored plastics and foods that don't even resemble food. Who do we have to thank for that? Ultra-processed foods. The increase in ultra-processed foods over the past couple decades has been staggering, incredibly dramatic, and so is the increase in the percentage of obesity, fatty liver disease, and other health-related diseases that are correlated to our diets. The correlation between the two of those things is no coincidence. But by studying and researching, medical journals and authorities across the globe have been able to understand better why ultra-processed foods are actually correlated to those things like obesity. But before we get into those negative effects, we have to understand what ultra-processed foods are. So let's go to the University of Sao Paulo's NOVA system. The NOVA classification system puts processed foods into 4 categories. The first 2 are just minimally processed foods, that's things straight out the ground or maybe you washed it and that's it. The next 2 categories, 3 and 4, are reserved for those more highly processed foods. Group 3 is processed foods that are anything that has been altered or changed from its natural state. So this could be washing, mixing, cutting, you could have frozen something. That would put it in category 3. For example, we have tomato sauce. So tomato sauce is, at its root, a tomato that's been grinded up into a paste, and then we add a couple things like vinegar, spices, onion powder, things you can pretty much recognize. This would be a processed food. There is another category reserved for more highly processed foods. These are UPFs, ultra-processed foods. Category 4 has things that essentially have had their nutrients stripped from them, so when you're eating them, you're really eating empty calories. These are things that have industrial grade ingredients, chemicals, additives, emulsifiers, things you cannot find in your kitchen. For example, we have veggie straws. Now, this is typically seen as healthy. It says the word veggie in it. Unfortunately, though, it is in group 4, and it has things like maltodextrin, lactic acid, potassium chloride, things that you don't cook with. This is a UPF, and it is very dangerous for our health. And you may be wondering, why are we creating things that we can't pronounce? Well, it's time for a little history lesson. During World War II, the US military needed to figure out how to make food easy to transport, cheap to make, and shelf stable to survive the war effort. And this is where we started with the food experimentation on a large scale. This was very helpful because we could dehydrate food and make sure soldiers on the front lines could eat, as well as give rations to people in rural areas of the country. Unfortunately, though, big food companies caught on, and they understood we can make a lucrative business out of these UPFs. So that's exactly what they did. They started adding chemicals, adding addictive chemicals, and making food more fun and tasty, but actually they just took out all the nutrients. This all leads us to the 1980s. This is when UPFs became commonplace, staples in the household. The 80s were neon, they were bright, and so was the food. Now, in present day, here's where we stand with UPFs. About 53% of the American diet comes from UPFs. That means your daily caloric intake, more than half of it is UPFs. For children, this is even worse. They get about 61% of their daily caloric intake from UPFs. We're not eating nutrients anymore, we're eating chemicals. But what does this mean for our health? Obviously, these numbers are scary, but why does it even matter? Well, the American Heart Association did a study of people over 19 years. People who had very high UPF consumption and people who had very low UPF consumption. What they found was a 31% higher mortality rate for those that had higher consumption levels. This means the people who were eating a lot of these sugary processed foods were 31% more likely to die at a time that would not be considered normal for their health versus those who didn't have these foods in their diet. And if this isn't enough, we can look at the obesity statistics in the United States. 70% of Americans right now are considered overweight or obese. This is double the number of 1976, just 4 years before these UPFs were commonplace in the house. Now, if that isn't the nail in the coffin, probably one of the more sad statistics: fatty liver disease in children. Originally and historically, fatty liver disease was really just reserved for adults close to the end of their life. We're starting to see a higher increase of it in children, according to the American Liver Foundation. And doctors are saying that it is a result of these UPFs, it's a result of poor diet, and a result of a lack of nutrients. So, unfortunately, since the time of World War II to now, we have seen that steady increase in poor results from our diets. Where our diet should be giving us nutrients and energy and health, they're actually leading us to unhealth, sickness, illness, disease, and the numbers prove that. But there is a way to balance it out. By reading ingredient labels, by making the easy switches, by only eating things that you or a friend can make in your kitchen, we can combat the effects of UPFs, and we can opt out. UPFs are damaging to our health and to our bodies, and on a nationwide level, some people are even considering it an epidemic. So next time you go to the grocery store, I hope you'll consider skipping a few of your favorite UPFs and skipping the health risks that go with them, and opting for things that you could find from nature, from the nearest ocean, or from a farmer. Thank you.